Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of the Neurodivergent Toolkit podcast. Today, I'm interviewing Fiona Sweet from Flourishing Families ASD, and we're going to be diving into a little bit about the circle of security and hopefully some tools that parents can then take on board at home when dealing with their children. So, Fiona, welcome to the podcast. My first question to you is all about your story. So every time someone comes on, I want to hear their why, their story, how they got to working in this field, and especially you working with ASD children. So please share.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I've been a social worker since my 20s, and I'm also the mum of 4 beautiful children. And when I had my third, I realised that there was something different about him. He had poor eye contact. He didn't really love being cuddled. And my mum, who's a maternal and child health nurse, I actually asked her, like, do you think he's okay? Like, what do you think's going on? And she was like, no, I really think he's okay. But you know how as a mum, you just have those red flags or those things that you just kind of shelve for later. So I really did that. But because I was a therapist, I actually knew about attachment. And so I just determined that I was going to connect with him really, really well. And so I spent, I invested a lot of energy and time in making sure that we had a really good connection. And I think that was, fundamentally important. It was really difficult getting a diagnosis with him. I took him to the GP when he was like probably 2 and 3 and 4 and said, I think he either has ADHD or autism. And they basically said, it's your parenting. You need to smack him harder. You need to discipline him more. It's you. And like I said, I had 2 older children that were also boys that were quite a bit older. There was a 7-year gap between number 2 and number 3. So I actually knew that I had the skills to parent and that actually there was this issue with him. But, the research shows that parents are able to identify neurodiverse sort of indicators so much earlier than professionals can. And it's so many parents' experience of not being believed by professionals. I definitely know that that's changing, like it is shifting a bit. But, this was 20 years ago and it was really, really difficult. So I guess from my perspective, there was that. I also had a dad that once my son was diagnosed at 5, my dad actually identified himself as neurodiverse. And my brother, we also identified that my brother, who by then had schizophrenia, was neurodiverse. And I just knew that I didn't want my son to suffer the way that my family members had. And so I guess it ramped up even more my determination for him to have the best opportunity that he could have to flourish. And so just realizing that, it's those kids, they take like 90% of the family pie. You've only got so much energy and so much energy basically to be able to give to your family. And if one person, just to stay alive, so that, because he was pretty chaotic, it was pretty tricky, just to keep him alive, it took, so much energy and so much intention from me. I worried about the other kids, and I know that is so many parents' experience. And so I guess for me, as I've gone through that journey and am now at the stage where he's actually at university and is flourishing, so he lives independently, he supports himself, he's at university, he still has autism. It's not easy for him, but he really is just thriving. I just knew that I really want other parents not to have such a difficult journey. And if there's anything that I can share about the struggle and the strengths of being the parent of children that have special needs and caring for the whole family, I really want to do that because I know that, even if our neurodiverse child thrives, if the rest of the family is falling off the cliff, that is not a success, is it, Vic? Like, we want the whole family to flourish. And so, yeah, that's really what's taken me into it.
Excellent. And I'm sure you were a social worker before dealing with your son's diagnosis, but I'm definitely sure that it's shaped your experience so that you can then work with other families on a more relatable basis. So I know, like, when you go to uni, you learn all these special skills, but then putting it into practice and then putting it into real life practice in your own family has then given you extra skills that you can then relate to other families.
Absolutely. Like, I really feel for the struggles of families because they're very real. They're very, very real. But also, so are the successes. Like, it's a beautiful journey once you are feeling more equipped, I guess.
Yeah, excellent. So, Fiona, the reason we're here is to talk more about your learnings and your understandings and helping families. So, the first thing I want to ask is all about the circle of security. So, can you please explain that to our listeners, especially for someone that's never heard that term before?
Yeah, sure. So the Circle of Security is a relationship-based parenting program that's really designed to enhance the attachment between parents and their kids, or any caregiver and their kids. It's really strongly evidence-based, which is fantastic. We know that it really works. And it really helps parents to understand and respond to their kids' emotional needs so that we're promoting secure attachment that supports healthy emotional development. So it is attachment. It's based on all that attachment research, which is really important to know. And it also helps parents to understand how to be a secure base for their kids, providing a safe and predictable environment for their exploration and emotional support. And so when we think about our ASD kids, like, we know that they really need routine and predictability. They really need that secure base so that they can thrive. And, things like routine, so sleep routines, feeding routines are really, really crucial for scaffolding the learning that kids on the spectrum have. And we really want to put in flexibility into those in-between times. So an example might be, I just remember with my son, one day I realised when a road was closed that my son absolutely lost it when we went a different way to school to take his big brother to school, like actually was beside himself. And so in my mind, I determined we were not going the same way again. And so every day we had to go a different way, which took me out of our way. Like, it was not easy, but I knew that I wanted him to have more flexibility. I wanted, that is a level of predictability that he didn't need in his life. That wasn't going to serve him for the rest of his life to only be able to go one way. And so I think that, the circle can help us with knowing where to support our child's exploration, even if they're uncomfortable, and where to provide that security and that safe haven. And he could cope with that probably after 3 different ways, honestly. I just wasn't going back to the same way after that.
Yeah.
But he could cope with that because he had the safe haven with me, because I could say, I know it's really hard that we're going a different way, but we're still going to take him to school, or we're still going to pick him up. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I could really support that framing.
And I think it's about building the resilience as well of them. And this is really for any child, not just an autistic child. But yeah, it's about building that resilience.
I really think, having had 4 kids, that so much of the interventions that we utilize for neurodiverse kids actually are just an extension of the stuff that we naturally teach our neurotypical kids. We just, like, because they pick things up so much more easily, we potentially have less intention and we maybe articulate them less clearly. And, you know, our neurodiverse kids need clear and repeated articulation of those interventions. But I think you're absolutely right, Vic. It's, you know, it's all the same kinds of stuff. It just requires some tweaking.
So then would you change the circle of security at all specifically for ASD children? Is this where you would add in that flexibility that you were talking about?
Yeah. So I guess we know that, so the Circle of Security program is a copyright, like proprietary program that only people that have been trained in it can provide. And so I guess the kinds of changes, they're not really changes to the program. It's like that drilling down. It's like really being able to have a look at and identify the different cues that neurodiverse kids give. So we know that kids, neurodiverse kids have fully functional attachment systems, that they, you know, want to connect with you just as much as a neurotypical child, of course, but that the cues that they give for what their needs are can be really different. So an example of that might be, you know, I might have a neurodiverse child that hurts themselves or is feeling really sad, and they come into their parent to get support and comfort from their safe haven, but they come close to you and then for some reason, so it might be, you know, sensory issues, it might be, you know, there could be any number of reasons. They might be hungry or tired, but they come in and they go, no. And so a parent that is wanting to comfort and support their child might interpret that as, and I know lots of parents that do, and I would have done that as well, they think, oh, they don't want me. Actually, they're better off without me. But that is not true. They do need you. It's about adapting the way that you support to what they need. So what it is that feels like comfort and support to them. But even just recognizing those cues so that you're able to appropriately meet their needs is really important. I mean, and on the, you know, top of the circle, as we would say, that exploration, you know, delighting in their exploration might look like when they're lining up their cars, actually enjoying that rather than internally thinking, I wish that they could do imaginary play. I wish that they weren't just spinning the wheels, but actually recognizing that as something to delight in because they enjoy it. The way that we would delight in a child that's going on a swing over and over and over and over, because we know the pleasure of being on a swing, you know? So yeah, it's really about recognizing those cues for exploration and for support.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that story of those cues being a little bit off. We were out on the weekend at a soccer carnival day that went from 7:30 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon. And my 5-year-old was quite sick. She was battling a cold. And it got to about 2 or 3 in the afternoon and she starts just hitting into me. She's like, I want to go home. And like, I know she doesn't want to be here. She's been so patient all day. She doesn't mean to be hitting me, but she's trying to vent her frustration. And yeah, and people would see that as, oh, she's acting up. She's got this behavior thing going on. But I'm like, no, she needs me and she needs me to listen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So could you share some simple everyday strategies for parents that can actually strengthen their connection with their child? Because I can imagine, especially autism specific, that it is hard to have that connection when you go, okay, this is what I did in my childhood. and this child looks completely different to my childhood growing up. How do they have that connection together?
Yeah, I think that it is really similar. It's like what we just spoke about, where even though it can look a bit different, it's the same needs. And so actually finding out, so, showing love and affection and, being physical is a way that all humans actually create connection with one another, isn't it? And so actually being able to identify what feels like loving touch to your child. So I actually recently asked my son what had felt like loving touch when he was a child. And one of the things that he mentioned was the OT that we were seeing, way back, had got us to do some skin brushing. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's not so sort of in anymore, but he actually said, when you used to brush me, I just loved it. It felt so good. And I just think if I had have realized that, every time that he'd had a meltdown, I would have gone, oh, honey, can I brush you? Oh, I'm really sorry. It's so hard. I really love you while I'm brushing. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
creating that so that they feel loved, because when the cues are off, it means that even though you're wanting to provide that support, you struggle to know how to meet that need in a way that the child can receive. Do you know what I mean? So, you think about, have you heard of the love languages, the 5 love languages?
Yeah.
So you think about, a more extreme version of, like, if I think that love is giving gifts and for you it's physical touch, it doesn't matter how many gifts I give you, you're not feeling it. Do you know what I mean? And so actually learning to tap into what it is that our child, what feels like connection for our child. So it might be, one child scratching their back, brushing, really firm hugs. So really just noticing those things. I think also, I'm a really, really big believer in the bedtime routine and recognizing. So, when we were kids and you would go to bed at night, and all of a sudden, like as your body started relaxing, your brain would remember all of the difficult things from the day. Do you remember that? Still
Well,
happens.
I remember that. Yeah, it happens every night for me. So
Absolutely. And so that is such an opportunity for us as parents to connect with our child. So creating a really special bedtime routine that they can enjoy for a long time, basically, I think is really crucial and a real opportunity for us. And I know that not all of our parents have had that experience themselves. And so I know that actually it's something that you can learn, even if you haven't had that experience yourself. But I would, identify that, for example, giving your child an hour a day where 30 minutes is the bedtime routine. So we used to do something like, because my son just loved fact books, so we would always read one fact book and then we would read one novel, and it didn't matter whether he didn't enjoy novels for a long time. But we know that as humans, it's actually stories that help us learn and help us to actually learn about other people's emotions. So a story can give us the opportunity to experience a different life from the one that we live and imagine what that would be like. And whilst it's really hard for our neurodiverse kids to imagine that, with our support, they really can. And so that's actually what they need, isn't it? They need to be able to, have flexible thinking, learn perspective taking, all of those social learning skills, where we can talk about, oh, I wonder what that person might have been thinking when that happened, or, oh, I wonder what they were feeling when the dog died. Do you know what I mean? So it's just a coaching opportunity. And from my perspective as a therapist, I know that, I can spend half an hour a fortnight with a child, and that is valuable. But if I can skill up a parent to have quality interactions and interventions with their child, that happens every day. That happens multiple times every day. And there is nothing like that. Like, a parent is so powerful in the life of their child. And so I guess I would see that as why being intentional about those connections is really, really valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really love that about, like, we do have a bedtime routine, and I try and split myself and my husband between 3 different children. But yeah, my son definitely likes that connection and just chatting even. But on your point there about upskilling parents to deal with this, and I know like parents are busy and they are dealing with multiple children, but another flip side of that is my son wakes up early. So we have that one-on-one time in the morning. So it might not
Beautiful.
even be at bedtime. It might be
No,
the
it can
first
be
half
any
hour of
time.
the day, and having that connection and sharing those experiences. Yes, that's
Yeah.
some great advice.
It
Yeah, I
doesn't
love
matter
that.
when
Like,
it is.
yeah. And we see multiple different therapists, and we've seen so many over the years, but it is really like upskilling me as a parent so that I can
Absolutely.
day to day deal with the ins and outs.
It really is. It's invaluable.
Mm-hmm. So, my next question I've got here is, what are some ways parents can respond when their child's behavior is challenging, but it's actually a sign that they're needing that comfort and connection? I think we've kind of gone over that with the cueing. So I might move on to the next question. I see so many parents that are unregulated themselves and are juggling many buckets. This is
Yeah.
an important one. So what would your approach be in clinic to help your parents through this situation?
Yeah, I think I just remember that so clearly myself, honestly. And, I still feel like that sometimes. Like, I think that it's really tricky. Parenting is like sailing a ship. Sometimes there's smooth sailing, and sometimes you've got choppy waters, and then it'll be smooth sailing again. And so just recognizing that actually it is tricky for us to stay regulated and to be kind to ourselves, I think, is really important. But I would take a 3-pronged approach. So I think that, the research is really, really clear that self-care, and I don't mean having a massage once a week. I think that's fantastic if you can get away with that, but I don't know any parent really that can do that. And that isn't really self-care. Like, what I mean, like, self-care that is the foundation of good mental health is about 4 things basically. And it's sleep, nutrition, exercise, and connection with people. And that is so foundational for us, and it's foundational for our children. It's foundational for our partners. Like, you think if nobody is sleeping well, nothing goes well, does it, Vic? And if people are eating crappy food, that, sad food, the highly processed food, that is not doing it's not doing anything good for our brains. Actually, it makes it really difficult for us to stay regulated. And we know that exercise, I mean, you would have heard the research that mild to moderate exercise is as good or better than medication for mild to moderate mental, depression. So just being able to get out and get enough exercise, being in nature, and connecting with somebody that cares about you, which, lots of families, I guess one of the things that I recognize as being really difficult for parents with kids with special needs is that it can be so difficult that relationships break down, and then parents are actually on their own doing this. So surrounding yourself as much as you can with a support network. So that would be the first thing. That's what I see as self-care, those really basic things. I also would approach it with psychoeducation, because basically, if you can't understand your child, if you don't really understand neurodiversity and, things like interoception, our experience of our internal body signs, proprioception, our experience of where we are in space and why we're so clumsy or spill the milk all the time, the communication difficulties and social difficulties, it's really hard not to be triggered by that child. Whereas if you've got a good understanding of actually what's going on for them, you have so much more empathy and compassion for their experience of the world. So I think that, and also you can better meet their needs. So I would definitely see the second prong as being, parent coaching and psychoeducation. And the third thing would be that providing therapeutic support to help with those triggers that you've inherited from your own earlier experience. We inherit these ways of dealing with things and these triggers from our own experience of being parented a lot of the time, or our own early childhood experiences. And we have ways now, somatic therapies, that actually mean we don't have to go over or identify in detail what those triggers are, and they still can be released. So, that trauma work of being able to connect our bodies with our emotions so that we can process them. So, yeah, I would take a 3-pronged approach in therapy.
Excellent. I love that. And one thing that I would add to that, just from my own personal experience, and I go to like all the different therapy sessions myself as a mum, but also sharing the load with your partner if the partner's still there, like my husband, but also getting him involved in these therapies as well, because I'm the one that's getting all this information in, and it's hard to relay what the therapist is saying week in, week out of strategies to, stay regulated when you're dealing with this child. And then parent after you become regulated. So, yeah, just definitely getting your partner involved. We've just started seeing, my son sees a counsellor, and both hubby and I are now going to get some of those parenting tips. But again, my son is 12, so it's taken us 10 years of therapy to get to this point. But I think it's going to be like a fantastic bonding experience. It's going to be progressive for my son. So I'm really looking forward to those outcomes.
It's a bit of a game changer, really, to get you both on the same page. And I actually do a lot of parent coaching with dads and mums together, because you're right, like going home and trying to explain something, it's so difficult. Whereas, having both parents in the room at the same time, it is really invaluable. And I really love that experience of seeing both mum and dad together.
Because it can be quite hard for like the father, because again, like this comes back to his experience growing up is so much different to parenting this child, and it just makes that connection that little bit harder.
It really does.
Yeah. So before we finish, I just want to, something that worked for your son. We've had this conversation previously, but if you could give one piece of advice to parents, what would it be? And especially in your situation, like you've done this, your son is now 21, 22. What was the best thing that worked in your situation?
So my bit of advice is different from the thing that worked. But so I think for me, keeping in mind that I'm parenting for the relationship that I want to have with my child when they're 15, when they're 20, when they've got their own kids. So I'm wanting to build a relationship that actually is enjoyable later. And you and I know that the relationship we have with our parents, it's actually based on when we were 2 and 3. It's based on those early memories that we still have that were either really nurturing or really difficult. And that 15-year-old remembers that like we do. Do you know what I mean? So keeping in mind that you're actually parenting for the long term. You're building this beautiful relationship and connection, not just for now, but actually for the future. I think that really, we're playing the long game. And I guess I also just really want parents to remember that they are the most influential person in their child's lives. And that, like we said before, for them to be skilled up to see interactions as interventions and opportunities to really provide guidance and help to their child all the time, I think is really, really helpful, because so many parents, and I felt like this, like I just felt like the experts knew what to do and I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never done this before. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was a social worker of many years' experience, but I felt so helpless because I so desperately wanted to help and heal my child. So I just really want to encourage parents that actually there is no one better to do it than them, and that it's okay to practice, to ask for help from, professionals, and to try things out and apply them and, fine tune and all that kind of thing. So that's kind of my advice in terms of big picture stuff. But I think that actually one of the most amazing things that happened for us was before diagnosis. This is after all the, the doctors had said there's something wrong and, it's me and all that kind of stuff. And I was just so bewildered. We decided to do an elimination diet, and which he still remembers because it wasn't very enjoyable for him, but he's very grateful. Anyway, we took him off all artificial colouring, flavouring and preservatives. And I hadn't realised, but his diet had basically got down to, sausages, peanut butter and jam sandwiches. I don't know if he was eating anything other than that, really, because we didn't eat a lot of junk food anyway. So I wasn't really aware of eating junk food. But I remember him picking him up from a child's birthday party and going to find him to take him home. And he was there with his arm around this massive bowl, just shoveling these Doritos with all this orange powder into his mouth as fast as he could. And I'm like, so we need to go home. And he's just like shoveling away. And so I'm trying to grab the bowl, and I was thinking like, oh, this isn't going to be good. But he just started, like, I picked him up and he started kicking me, and he was really out of control. And I was just like, this is not what he is usually like. Like, I'd worked really hard to have a very strong connection with him. And so that was a real wake-up call for me of the impact of food on his cognition. And since then, I've actually worked with families with kids that are nonverbal and that are being suspended or expelled from daycare, that, really, it's as if there's perspex between them and their parent, like, a soundproof room where they can see what's going on, but they can't really connect. And they have, so, one of my parents actually decided to stop working. She took a month off. She cooked everything from scratch, and she just took all artificial food basically out of her child's diet and really did focus on interventions. And by the end of the month, they actually had started speaking. And so it really was a cognition, like it was clouding cognition. So you think about, for us, if we eat really crappy food, over time, we start feeling yucky, don't we? And we have cotton wool brain. What would you call that, Vic? Do you call it cotton wool brain?
You're probably just more like being able to think clearer.
Yeah, where you really can't think properly. It's like you're
Mhm.
swimming through mud in your thoughts. So we just know that already our kids are struggling with communication. So barriers like that are really impactful in terms of getting rid of anything that might be providing an extra hindrance, I guess. And there's just so much research now about the impact of food on our microbiome and then, on our brain, on our hormone development, all that kind of stuff. I just am so grateful that I tried that with him. And it made a really big difference. It's not a cure. It doesn't cure autism. That isn't what I'm saying at all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think that it's worth a try if your child's lunchbox is full of, rice cake packets and, all the kind of processed food that seems healthy, but actually there's hidden sort of nasties in it. Yeah.
Yeah, very similar to like how we started on this journey as well with my son and additives and, being so addictive and being, just lots of things. But I do have lots of podcasts on food. It's so interesting. Like that's my background. And then this whole conversation led to food.
Yeah.
And additives, so powerful.
Really
So,
powerful.
yeah. So a few things that I want parents to take away from this is one, that they're not alone. They can access therapy for their children, but also getting that parent advice as well and taking that on board because you are the biggest influence for your child and you can put those therapy interventions in place 7 days a week at home and it's really going to make your life, much smoother. And it might not happen straight away. It might not happen every single day, but overall it's going to be run a lot smoother. Yeah,
I
think
honestly, Vic, I think, easy life now, hard life later, hard life now, easy life later. And I just think about my son and how hard it was being so intentional and putting all that work in. But now I get the joy of seeing him flourish, seeing his independence, seeing how proud he is of himself and I am of him. And I just know that it could have been really different. Like if I'd taken the easy route and let him be on screens all the time, which believe me was what he wanted, and hadn't have been so intentional with the interventions, I just know we would have had a much different outcome now. So I really agree with you.
Yeah. So a big one for me on my journey has been showing parents that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So like you said before, it's going to be hard now, but easier later. And there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
So Fiona,
Yeah.
thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. I know I've learned a lot and I hope this has been really resourceful for parents. But just before you go, can you tell people where they can find more information about your services that you offer?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Instagram and I'm also on Facebook. And I have a website, flourishingfamiliesasd.com.au. And I have an email, fiona@flourishingfamiliesasd. That's the .com.au, isn't it? Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fiona. This has been very insightful. So thanks and talk soon.
Yeah, thanks, Vic. Bye.